For the past few months, I've been transforming my character designs into POPMART style art toys, but this time around, it's my turn to decide who's next, and I choose Starry. Let's see if I can transform Starry into a POPMART style art toy. If you're unfamiliar with POPMART, they're an extremely popular manufacturer of art toys and blind boxes, so to show you what they're like, I've bought 3 more of their blind boxes to open throughout this video. Let's start with this Hirono shelter box. All of the figures within this collection are pretty cute, so I'm not too worried about which one I'll get. Let's see what it is. Is it a porta potty? Oh wait, it's a clock. And Hirono is inside. I love figures that have moving parts like this. It kind of reminds me of the mailbox Labubu that I recently opened. Okay, we're off to a great start, so let's start designing my very own Starry POPMART style art toy. I like to imagine that Starry is an excited and slightly mischievous person, so tilting one of her legs and putting a hand onto her mouth like she's giggling could emphasize this. Now, after sketching in her lashes, star-shaped pupils, spiky hair and outfit, we can start to fill in her base colours. Just like my sticky POPMART style art toy, I want to match some details within Starry's design, so giving her some spiky edged socks to match her hairstyle should look great. Right, Starry is now looking super cute, so let's jump into Nomad Sculpt on my iPad and transform this design into a 3D model. After importing the same base head that I use for all of my art toys, I'm starting things off by shaping a sphere and a cylinder into a torso. Now, using a tube tool, I'm drawing on her limbs, rounding out the ends using some spheres, and adding the hands and feet. Okay, after totally forgetting to screen record for about an hour, we can now begin to add some raised clothing details to this Starry 3D model. Drawing on the clothes and then extracting them using this mask tool is my favourite way to add depth to a sculpt. Not only does it make it super simple to wrap the clothing around each limb, but extracting the shapes also puts them onto a separate layer, allowing you to push and pull them around the model. After extracting Starry's eyes and carving away 2 star-shaped pupils, we can now place a row of cones onto the head for the hair, extrude and smooth her spiky hairline, and send off this final 3D model to my 3D printer. Okay, whilst we wait for that to print, let's open my second POPMART box, the Seeker Take It Slow box. In my opinion, the best figures from this series have to be Afternoon at the Ranch, Wind's Kiss, and Walking in the Meadow. Let's see what we get. No way! It's Afternoon at the Ranch! This is such a beautiful figure. The texture on the grass reminds me a lot of Van Gogh paintings, plus these little people enjoying their day is very sweet. What a great figure. Right, I'll be opening the third and final blind box a little bit later, so be sure to stick around to see if my good luck holds up. About 3.5 hours later, Starry has finished printing, and I must say, aside from a few support defects, she has printed incredibly well. I was nervous that her tall hair spikes would slip or snap off, but they're super smooth and symmetrical. Right, let's get to work and do some surface preparation. To fill these support defect imperfections, I've decided to use Free Form Air, which is an extremely lightweight 2-part epoxy dough. After mixing equal parts of part A and part B together, you can squish it into any gaps and smooth it out using your fingers. Then, once fully cured, sanding it down with sandpaper blends the filler into the 3D printed surface very nicely. Starry's head and body are now much smoother, so it's finally time to start painting, which is my favourite part of any project. Since the surface of this print is already looking pretty good, I'm going to skip the spray filler primer that I normally use and go straight in with some black model paint. Using black as a base coat makes the most sense in this case, as it's the most prominent colour within Starry's design. Right, now that Starry has an even base coat, we can start to paint on her skin tone using my airbrush and this pre-mixed pink model paint. This paint is too thick, however, so we need to mix in the perfect amount of airbrush paint thinner. Adding too much thinner will make the paint sheer and runny, but not adding enough thinner clogs the airbrush and makes it splatter. I'm also not the best at airbrushing, so it usually takes me some trial and error to achieve the correct consistency. Right, Starry is looking fairly pink, so let's open my final POPMART blind box whilst we wait for this skin tone to dry, and this time it's the Mega Space Molly Series 3 box. There are definitely a few figures in this series that I do not want, like the Ted 2 and the Care Bears, but all of the others are pretty cool. Let's see what we get. And it is Tetris Molly. I love all of these Tetris pieces inside of her spacesuit, and she even has a tiny laser gun that she can hold. It seems like my POPMART blind box luck is finally coming around. Right, let's get back to work and start painting Starry's body. First things first, we need to clean up all of this airbrush overspray with some more black model paint. But I have just realised that the pose I have chosen for Starry is quite possibly the hardest one to paint. There are so many small gaps that my paintbrush just cannot fit into. Okay, that was definitely a challenge, but I've tried my best. So let's begin to colour in her shoes and her socks. Starry's white socks are slightly peeking through her Mary Jane style shoes, so I'm layering in this white section before painting on the black shoe strap. Now, after using a white colouring pencil to sketch in the spiky sock guidelines, we can carefully fill them in. Looking good. Let's move on to Starry's face and start off by covering up all of this airbrush overspray. I probably could have been a little more careful when painting the skin tone, but I figured that overlapping the hairline would result in a much cleaner final paint job once it's all tidied up. This is also much easier to paint than the body, since there aren't any tiny gaps to fit into. Now, after using a thinner paintbrush to carefully outline the edges of Starry's hair, we can mix some slow dry fluid into a bit of white model paint and colour in the eyeballs. I like to layer up the whites of the eyes using 4 to 5 thin coats to avoid clumping. After a few hours, these sections are now fully dry, so we can use the same thin brush as before to fill in Starry's eyebrows and lashes. And this time around, although painting the facial features is the most nerve-wracking part, I've tried my best to film it all for you. This also allows you to see how slowly I paint when I'm concentrating. Now it's time to fill in Starry's star-shaped pupils, which is much easier thanks to the shapes that I carved out during the 3D modelling process. The stars have already been aligned, so all I have to do is fill them in. See? Super simple. Starry is already looking much more like herself, but before we can add the finishing touches, she needs a nose and a mouth. Just like the socks, I'm going in with another colouring pencil to carefully map these out. Their placement being correct is vital. Then, once aligned onto the face, we can trace these guidelines using a tiny dotting tool. Okay, I am really happy with this smile, so let's put her head onto her body, paint in some finishing touches, and see how this Starry POPMART style art toy has turned out. And here she is. This Starry POPMART style art toy is now complete. This is definitely a more simple art toy design, but I'm still pleased with the result. I actually decided at the last minute to paint the white stars and the freckles, but it was well worth it. Also, my favourite part of this design has to be the matching socks and hair. These details work so well together, just like Sticky and Starry. Maybe Starry is laughing at Sticky's lollipop misfortune. I'd love to know what you think of this art toy in the comments below, and if you have any suggestions for who or what I should make next, be sure to let me know. Okay, thank you so much for watching until the end. If you're enjoying my content and you would like to see more project videos like this one, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Right, I will see you in the next video.